got to tell you, it took a lot of convincing to get myself to record this Morning Pitt after getting home from the game last night. A late game. It went extra late. I mean, it wasn't that late in the start time. It was a 7 o'clock tip-off, but that second half was interminably long. I think we figured out that it was 71 minutes long for the second half, thanks to there being like 27 foul calls and about 42 free throws, and that's not an exaggeration. There really were like 42 free throws, prolonging what ultimately was a rather uninspiring, disappointing outcome. Yet another uninspiring, disappointing outcome in what's become a season full of them, and certainly a half season or an ACC schedule full of them. And so it took some convincing last night to me to record this Morning Pitt after getting home from the game at the Peterson Event Center. Pitt's 73-67 loss to Georgia Tech. I mean, it didn't take that much convincing. I knew I was going to do it. I wasn't going to go into today without a Morning Pitt. There would always be one. But I really, I struggled when I sat down to record this. I said, well, what is there to say? What is there new to add to discuss this Pitt basketball team right now? And maybe this is the fallacy in playing 31 games. You know, these 30-game schedules, you know, teams sort of establish who they are. They show you who they are. Occasionally there are occasional variations and variances, you know, on a game-to-game basis. This guy, you know, has a big game. That guy has a big game. This guy struggles. That guy struggles, whatever it may be. But, I mean, you know who the team is. I think you have a pretty good idea, certainly by the time you get to game number 28, which last night was game number 28, not counting the exhibition game. But once you get to game 27, 28, probably game 20, you have a pretty clear idea of who you are. There aren't too many teams that undergo drastic changes and adjustments and evolutions in the final 10 games of the regular season. It's not to say it doesn't happen, and certainly teams can enter the postseason and get hot like NC State did last year. But the reality is you probably know who the team is. And so, you know, by the time you get to this point where you're 28 games into the season, there's only a few games left, you find that you're just saying the same things over and over again. You're saying the same things about the team because the team is largely defined by its characteristics, and you're just discussing those characteristics over and over again. And for those of us who talk about Pitt, and those of us who watch Pitt, and those of us who write about Pitt, and those of us who post on message boards about Pitt and talk to other people about Pitt, we've been saying the same things over and over again for the better part of at least the last 2 months, if not the last 3, depending on when you want to backdate it to and how long you carried on those conversations after a game like the Mississippi State game. Bad rebounding, bad defense, slow starts. And there's a lot that's sort of buried within each of those topics. There's a lot that's sort of buried within each of those categories. And there are a lot of little offshoots that you can point to. Well, there's this and there's that. But when it comes down to it, this team starts slow, they don't rebound, and they don't defend. And when you do all of those things, or don't do all of those things, when those are 3 defining characteristics of who you are, you know where you end up? 16-12. 7-10 in the ACC. Clinging to hopes of a 500 record in the conference, which would have seemed preposterous 2 months ago, let alone 6 months ago. No way could they possibly be a 500 team in the conference. I mean, this team is going to win at least 14, 15, 16 games in the ACC. They're not going 10-10. Now, they would hope to go 10-10. And quite frankly, it probably doesn't matter anyway what they do in the regular season. I still sort of believe that their fate will be decided ultimately by the ACC tournament, that's the only path for them to get in. And I think there's some bracketologists online who might have a different take. But I mean, to me, it's ACC tournament championship or bust. There's no other path for this team to reach the NCAA tournament. But even that feels like sort of an unnecessary conversation at this point, given where this team is and how they've arrived here. Slow starts, bad defense, bad rebounding. They've scored 30 points in the first half in each of the last 2 games, the Notre Dame game and this game last night. Both games that came down to being, you know, just a handful of points separating them at the end. Pitt lost by 6 last night. They lost by 4 at Notre Dame. If you're not so god-awful in the first half, guess what? Maybe you win those games that are close at the end. If they're not god-awful against Clemson in the first half, guess what? Maybe that game doesn't go to overtime. If they're not god-awful against Louisville, they don't lose a 4-point game. Duke, they were going to lose. I mean, they got blown out in that game. But at Florida State, they lose by 12. Maybe that's a little bit too much to make up. But the Louisville game at home, they lose by 4. The Clemson game, they lose in overtime by 3. They lose at Wake Forest by 2. They lose at North Carolina by 1. They lose at Notre Dame by 4. And they lose to Georgia Tech last night at home by 6. All of those games lost by 6 or fewer points. Many of them lost by 4 or fewer points. And in most cases, or at least half of those games I just mentioned, lost by 2 or fewer points. Don't suck in the first half. Don't be so bad in the first half that you dig yourself these giant holes. And then guess what? Maybe you win those games instead of ending up on the wrong side of a 1-point loss or a 2-point loss or a 4-point loss or a 6-point loss. If you're not as bad as you were, if you're not as bad as they were last night in the first half or at Notre Dame in the first half or so on and so forth, and we know it because we've seen it week after week, game after game, then you win some of these games. But, it's funny as I list that as sort of being like the 3 problems, the slow starts, the bad rebounding, the poor defense. I mean, the reality is, the slow starts are a result of, among other things, bad rebounding and poor defense. They're a result of inefficient play on offense, of poor shooting, of turnovers, of just not playing well. And so it's not really 3 separate issues. There are several main big issues: the bad rebounding, the bad defense, and then really inconsistent and often inefficient offense, which in itself has a lot of tendrils that spring out that you could look at of why that's the case. And they all sort of come together to lead to bad starts to these games, slow starts to these games, and then ultimately where Pitt is right now, 16-12 overall, 7-10 in the ACC. And there's a lot of reasons why these things have happened every game. There are a lot of, primary usual suspects, and they are the usual suspects because they're the same players and coaches who are causing these effects, causing these outcomes every single game. It was a game last night where Jalen Lowe scored 25 points. Ishmael Leggett scored 20. They weren't necessarily very efficient. Lowe was 7 of 21 from the floor. Leggett was a little bit better at 5 of 14. That's not terrible, but it's still not great. And David Stoudemire said after the game, basically he said that's fine. We'll let those guys score. For us, it was about making sure, the other guys didn't go off, that Lowe and Leggett are going to get their points. It's a volume thing. And he even said, he was like, Lowe had 25 points, he's, on 21 shots. He's like, we'll take that. We're happy with that. That was a win for Georgia Tech, for Jalen Lowe to score 25 points on 21 field goal attempts. Now, obviously, he got 9 points at the free throw line. But when Jalen Lowe goes 7 of 21, he goes 2 of 9 from 3. That's not helping the offense. And Jalen Lowe made some big shots last night. He made some big plays last night. He also had 8 assists. And oftentimes, I think what you see with players is you run into trouble, you get into trouble, you fall behind, and players start pressing. They start doing things outside of what they should be doing or what they can do or how they can best help the team and just try to do it all themselves. We've seen that in the past with Pitt guards under Jeff Capel, and I think we're seeing it this year with Jalen Lowe. Pressing, trying to take over the game, trying to be the guy. I think his heart's in the right place, but he's got to understand how he can best help the team win. And that doesn't mean he shouldn't shoot. He absolutely should. He's one of their best scorers and one of their best players, and he has to do it. But 8 assists is a pretty good number. And that's a way you can play within the team. But it hasn't happened enough. Ishmael Leggett had an inefficient night last night. He was 3 of 6 from 3, but 2 of 8 from inside the arc, including a pretty bad whiff in the final minute that could have, really made a game out of it. Jalen Lowe drives, kicks to Zach Austin. Zach Austin shoots the 3 and misses. Jalen Lowe gets the offensive rebound, kicks back out to Leggett. Leggett has a clear shot to the hoop, and just a shot that he's made 600 times this year. It clangs. And Georgia Tech gets a bucket at the other end. Bad rebounding, bad defense, inefficient, and inconsistent offense. This team, we knew they weren't going to be as good of a shooting team as last year, but I think they've fallen short of what they really needed. And you know what? The Damian Dunn injury hurts them as well here, because he could have been another scorer. He could have been another shooter. Could have been a third option along with, and slightly behind, but along with Lowe and Leggett. But instead, because he's out, now Zach Austin and Guillermo Diaz-Graham are being counted on for that production, and neither one of those guys is someone who's going to be a focal point of your offense. Zach Austin is not, and I mean, we've said this a million times, you don't run your offense through Zach Austin. Zach Austin gets his points on driving kicks. He gets his points on offensive rebounds and putbacks and loose balls and chaos points. Zach Austin, chaos points. I said that last year, and that's still his role this year, even if he's been shooting better from three this year than he did a year ago. But that's his role, and that's not a central point, a focal point of the offense. Not the way Lowe's role is, or Leggett's role is, or Dunn's role would be. The rebounding. And Jeff Capel said it last night. They haven't been a good rebounding team all year. They got out-rebounded by 10 last night. They gave up 11 offensive rebounds to Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech turned those into 17 second-chance points. Pitt actually had 10 offensive rebounds and got 2 second-chance points out of it. Now, 3 of their 10 offensive rebounds were team rebounds, where they had a shot and went out of bounds off of Georgia Tech. But the fact is, this team has been a bad rebounding team all season. Somehow they've actually been worse as a rebounding team than last year. I don't know if it's because Leggett's not getting as many rebounds as he did last year. He still had he had 4 last night, excuse me. But for Cam Corrin to go through the entire first half last night and get 0 rebounds, I'm not shocked, because we've watched this happen all season, but it's startling to see a center with his size and his build and presumably his strength. Looking at him, I would assume he is a strong person, to have 0 rebounds in the first half last night. You can't win like that. You're not going to be able to win like that. And we can get into the why Cam Corrin was counted on to do this. You heard the interview with Jeff Capel over the summer, that Capel believed that Corrin's rebounding rate and the way he was used at Florida State and how he would be used at Pitt, it would all come together and create more opportunities for him, and he would rebound much better, and it would be the answer that Pitt needed at the Capel didn't say the answer part. I added that. But Capel had a very convincing case on why he believed Cam Corrin would be an upgrade at the center position, both offensively and rebounding. Well, he's been a downgrade at defensively. He's been at best even with where Federico was last year, rebounding wise, and he's been better offensively, but that just doesn't matter. You look at last night, he went 6 of 6, scored 12 points, and had 2 rebounds and 2 assists. And someone I know I was talking to after the game asked me this question, and I'll ask you. What would you rather have? Cam Corrin last night, 6 of 6, 2 rebounds, 12 points, 2 assists, no turnovers, and 1 block. Or would you rather have Bae Dongo, the Georgia Tech center, who went 2 of 6, scored 11 points, and had 17 rebounds, as well as 2 assists and 6 turnovers? Give me Dongo's stat line all day long. 17 rebounds, 5 offensive rebounds. Cam Corrin had 2 total rebounds. Dongo had 5 offensive rebounds. Give me that all day long. That's what Pitt needs. Pitt needs rebounding out of the center. And I'm not sitting here and saying, I've been saying this all along. Last year, this time, I said Pitt needs offense out of the center and rebounding. They needed a guy who could catch the ball and get it in his hands, and it wouldn't bounce off his hands. And they got that this year, that when you pass to him, he holds on to the ball. He doesn't lose it. And he even finishes. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter within the how this team is built, how they're constructed, how they play, what they attempt to do. It doesn't matter that Cam Corrin can go 6 of 6 from the floor. it's irrelevant. We pointed this out before. He's got 2 20-point games in his career. His college career, 2 20-point games, and his team lost both of those games. His top 5 scoring games in his career, his team in those games is 2-3. Like, it doesn't matter what kind of scoring you get out of Cam Corn. What matters is the rebounding, and to a lesser extent, and I'll tell you why I say a lesser extent in a second, but to a lesser extent, the defense. The rebounding is the primary thing you need from the center position, and it's going to be really interesting to see if Jeff Capel goes into next season with more of an eye toward getting rebounding out of the center position. Now, I say that I don't think defense is quite as important because I think, first of all, I mean, this team as a whole has defensive issues. And you can overcome those if you can score. And, and if you can get offensive rebounds. With the way this team is built, I think, where the guards are leading the way and the guards are going to be shooting a lot and driving, what you need out of the center is somebody who can collect the misses and get some putbacks. And a game like last night, Pitt they actually shot well in the first half. They were 43% in the first half. They still only scored 30 points. But in the second half, I think they were 31%. But some of these games where they're playing so poorly in the first half, they're shooting so poorly in the first half, you need someone who can grab those rebounds. And I think I would, given the choice, do you want a defensive center or a rebounding center? Give me the rebounder. Give me the rebounder. Give me the guy who can collect the offensive rebounds. Give me the guy who can limit the other team's offensive rebounds. That's what they need. And Cam Corn doesn't provide that. He doesn't. And I understood the logic in why they brought him in. I understood the logic in why they thought he would get better at it, but he hasn't. And, whether he chooses to move on or you choose to, whatever it is, you need a different type of player at center next year. And that doesn't mean Cam Corn can't have a role on this team. He could be a backup center, but your primary center has to be someone who rebounds for you. It's too much of a vulnerability for a team that has other vulnerabilities. Too many of them. But I mean, this is all just like window dressing, and again, it's coming back and saying the same things over and over again, right? We're still talking about Cam Corn. We're still talking about rebounding. We're still talking about defense. We're still talking about first half deficits. We're just talking about the same things over and over again. And it's led to a 7-10 record in ACC play. It's led to a 16-12 overall record. It's led to Pitt being on the wrong side of the bubble. And it's led to a season that stands as, the most disappointing season of Jeff Capel's career. And one of the most disappointing seasons at Pitt that I can remember in quite some time. It might go back 10 years to find the last season that was this disappointing. For who they have, how those guys have played, and what the end result has been with this team. It's a real disappointment. And now they're at Louisville on Saturday, at NC State next. What day is that? Saturday's the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. Next Wednesday. And then they close against Boston College at home on Saturday, March 8th. And then it's the NCAA tournament or ACC tournament, and you see if they can make a run. But how do they make a run when they can't defend? How do they make a run when they don't rebound well? Their offense can get hot. How many games in a row can their offense get hot? Enough to get all the way through the ACC tournament? Seems unlikely. But we'll all be watching. I know that. I know there weren't many people at the game last night. I think they announced it at 6,000, which that's some home cooking there on those stats. There weren't many people there, but I appreciate everybody who was on the message boards all night talking about the game. And at least we give you that, right? You got a place to go talk to other Pitt fans about it and kind of have those conversations. So don't forget to check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. We'll have more coverage from the game last night. We'll also have football coverage and recruiting stuff because you might need a bit of a distraction from that for sure. But we also have the message boards where you can talk to other Pitt fans about what happened in the game and about what's coming up and all those different things. It's a good place to interact with other Pitt fans, which you might not like what you're seeing from the teams, but at least you can still talk to other Pitt fans about it, and that makes it better a little bit, right? Makes it better a little bit. All right, thanks for tuning in today. I appreciate it. I never even played the intro music. I feel like this happens on the day after a game, particularly after a loss. Sometimes we don't get around to playing the intro music, but oh well. I think you can live for one day without it, and if you really need it, I can, you can watch another video from like yesterday or the day before. So, like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We appreciate everybody who tunes in today. Hope you've had a great week so far, aside from the game last night. Enjoy your Wednesday. Oh, don't forget, we'll be live tonight, 8:30 p.m. right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Jim and I will be talking about Pitt sports, so hopefully you can tune in. We'll talk basketball, but maybe we'll talk other things too. Whatever's on your mind, we can talk about it. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So like and subscribe. Have a great Wednesday, and we will catch up with you tonight for the live show at 8:30, and then the Morning Pitt tomorrow right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.